hot topic for content creators. This is where I pitch a hot topic to you guys, and then you guys turn around and create some content on said topic, coming at it from various different angles or whatever subjects surrounding that prompt. And I will in turn feature your video. If you tag me in your video, or if you share the link with me, I will feature your video on a future live stream and respond to it live on the air. Otherwise, you're always welcome to just go ahead and jump in the conversation. These are ongoing conversation threads, I call them, because we're kind of just embroidering these topics as they develop. You can just go ahead. You want to join the conversation, you can hop in the comments section down below, and you can leave a nice, long, cogent, cohesive comment, almost like a blog post length, if you wish, and I will address your comment in detail during a future live stream. So let's get right into it. We have some comments here to address. Representation in fiction. So the first one from J.R. Carroll just says, "Oh, snap! This is a hot topic." I mean, if you want to, please feel free. Don't be shy with me. Don't be shy with me, JR. You should know that by now. Speak your mind, man. Whatever you got to say about it. Tell me how you really feel. You know, don't be shy on the spice. I like it when people bring the spice. All right, so this one comes from someone who is someone that I do not recognize from the channel. I do know that they are coming from a Discord that I am a part of. So it's always nice to see some new faces on the channel here. And this is from RK. RK writes, "Early on in your video, you touch on a critical issue to communication of any kind. In order to have a discussion, we have to have a common language." I mean, that's debating 101. You and I both speak English, but to illustrate my point, suppose an atheist, a rabbi, a priest, a Protestant pastor, and an imam sat down to discuss Jesus. Is there a punchline in here somewhere? They may have a general idea of who it is they're talking about, but they all have very different ideas of who Jesus is or was. I'm following you. Similarly, we have to have some consensus regarding the terms we're going to use in our discussion. The key terms to begin with seem to be representation and problematic. Yeah, you're on point with that. I did bring both of those up. There are other terms to define, but there are less critical up front. I want to know what you have to say about problematic, but first he starts with representation. He says, as I understand, representation, as I understand, it occurs when an author introduces a character illustrative of individuals in society who are often ignored, misunderstood, or otherwise rejected from the mainstream, intentionally or otherwise, from the author's point of view. I don't know if I agree with that definition, but we'll go with it. I'll say, okay, this is your understanding of it. We'll go with it. It says problematic. Problematic is, for me, all right, so you clarify, is for me a bit more difficult to define precisely because I have yet to hear any objective definition of it. So we're kind of in the same boat as far as that goes, because I'm like, what the hell? What do you guys mean by problematic? We're talking about fiction here, right? We're talking about fictional works. We're talking about, you know, a product or a piece of art. You know, it is problematic. A problem for whom, I wonder, when you say problematic? Because it almost sounds like it's being, anytime I hear someone use, I'll just say this right up front, anytime I hear somebody use the term problematic, I'm thinking to myself, okay, somebody is about to try to manipulate me. in some shape, fashion, or form. That's what I think comes to my mind. Like a shame on you type of thing. You know what I mean? I'm waiting for the shame on you portion whenever I hear the term problematic. Shame on you for saying they're fat. Shame on you for stating the obvious. Shame on you for making a judgment call. From what I can gather, problematic is a near synonym for controversial. That is, something can be seen as, quote, problematic when there is some degree of disagreement over it. All right. So you're saying if something is called problematic, it simply means that it is something that could be considered divisive. When you say controversial, usually controversial, it's like something is divisive, meaning that there's going to be two sides to the issue. It's just there's going to be some sort of divide on the issue. And I don't necessarily see that as a problem. Maybe sometimes, especially if we're talking about in terms of fiction, maybe there needs to be more problematic material in that regard. People do need to argue more about certain things. And maybe fiction is a safe, I'll say that right now. That's a good point, because sometimes maybe fiction is a safe, I will say the word safe, medium for having arguments, because there's nothing personal involved in it, because it's over a piece of work. So say, okay, it's a piece of fiction. In a piece of fiction, you can illustrate some of the most controversial and taboo subject matter that otherwise, if it was something discussed out in the open, as far as in the real world and pertaining to actual real life living, breathing individuals, who have to get on with their lives and move on with their lives. And this is why I cannot stand, like, there's three types of people, right? There's people who like to gossip and talk about people. Those are the small brain people. And then you have the middle brain people that like to talk about events, and that's the more common. That's where the vast majority of people like kind of sit. This huge swaths of the population like to talk about events that transpire. The news, if you will. What's going on in the news? Those are events. But then you have, kind of the big brain people, the intellectuals, if you will, that like to discuss ideas. And the best way to discuss ideas without getting too ideological, in my opinion, or too political, is to do it through fiction, kind of using fiction as the medium to discuss big ideas or controversial ideas or anything of that nature that could be considered divisive. Now, I know not everybody reads fiction for that matter. Some people read fiction and it's literally just escapism. People read fiction because they claim that they want to escape the day-to-day. Okay, but you need to understand that's not everybody. Okay, some of us can handle the divisive stuff. In fact, we find it interesting. We find it psychologically stimulating, if you will, to look at those things through the lens of a fictional narrative. In other words, this isn't history. Okay, there's historical fiction, and then there's history books. Okay, so there's this thing where you need to understand, okay, if something is considered historical fiction, I don't consider that reading actual history. You see what I'm saying? And I think that, there's this line that's getting blurred within the medium where it's like people go to fiction to actually become educated. And it's like, no, you're not going to fiction to become educated. That's what nonfiction is for. Go to nonfiction if you just want the trivial knowledge. You want the quote unquote facts. Now, of course, that's a whole another debate in and of itself, but I'm not going to go there. I'm just talking about representation in fiction. So let's see, let's go on here. So no problem as far as that goes, at least not with me. With other people, perhaps. So it's like one of those things where it's like you got to know your audience, all right? It says to address the other comments in the video, he says, quote, do you believe it is possible for an author's portrayal of an individual within their story who has a particular set of characteristics the author does not possess to be, quote, problematic if handled insensitively? And RK goes on to say, he says, an author's portrayal of anything could be controversial whether the author possesses characteristics they portray or not. Yeah, I can agree with that. I don't believe an author's portrayal of a character should be controversial, but in reality, where there are self-appointed gatekeepers on pop culture and art in general, those gatekeepers will stir up controversy for their own motives. Yes, the the moral outrage police. I get a kick out of those people. I love them. They're all over Twitter. They're all over Twitter. The pigeons, if you will. There's a little bit of a theme with pigeons on here, but yeah, the dirty birds, I should say, the dirty birds of Twitter. They like to, you know, get their feathers. It ruffles their feathers when certain topics are talked about in fiction, and I get a kick out of it. I love it. I think it's more, baby. We need more of it. A lot of them are disingenuous with their intentions. It is really just at the end of the day, they're doing it for attention, and they're all their moral grandstanding is really just them virtue signaling, saying like, "Oh, look how good I am. I'm such a good person, you guys." And it's like, fucking get over yourself. You're so full of shit. Since there is no objective criteria for what qualifies as, quote, problematic, nothing can be inherently problematic. Exactly. I mean, that's kind of the point that I was alluding to. It goes on to say, can you call an author a, quote, ableist if they include characters that are handicapped, not just physically, but to say perhaps the story features an individual with a developmental disability? you did a little edit there. I see. You didn't want to say retard. That's okay. You know, I don't expect you to repeat the same language I have. Some people are very sensitive when it comes to language. And those characters are written in such a way that could be perceived as unflattering. You can call an author an ableist for any reason you like, but it doesn't make them anything in particular. Ableism is a subjectively defined category of prejudicial thought in which one may assert an author is biased against people with disabilities. One may choose whatever criteria they like in order to define any ism. So you seem, I will say, RK, right now, you seem to be kind of just taking a middle of the road approach here. It says in legal processes, intent matters. That is not the case in the court of public opinion. Whether or not you intend any particular faux pas is irrelevant, because in the mind of the observer, you have committed the faux pas. They may then assign whatever malice to your motives they like and proceed to attack their straw man. Yeah. The trap so many fall into is to treat such attacks seriously, engage them, and therefore give them any degree of credibility. Exactly. In other words, allowing the Looney Tunes and the moral outrage folks to basically convince you that you need to prove yourself innocent of whatever it is that they are, any allegations they may have against you. And personalize the straw man attacks as if they were a part of the person's original intent. Yeah. So the biggest thing is like when the Looney Tunes go up in arms, you just gotta, you take whatever they have to say with a grain of salt, and you just kind of, okay, all right, yep, okay. It's just funny to see them like get angry. Is it ever okay for an author who is writing fiction, mind you, to villainize characters based solely on their beliefs. This is a hot one. RK says, sure, an author can villainize anyone they like for any reason they like, but that doesn't mean they'll have written a good story or a good character. Fiction is inherently not real, and while it may be written in a way as to seem more or less feasible in some cases, it is not intended to be reality. Exactly. Any author can write whatever story they want, but that does not mean their story will be well written, yep, nor to the taste of the general public. Sure. And another thing on that, I'll just say that if you publish something, just to let you, a lot of you indie authors know out there, not necessarily those of you who are watching, but that just, through the grapevine, if you guys come across, indie authors and they're talking about this type of stuff, if you put something out on the market, on the commercial market, it's in the public square. That is considered the public square when you publish something on the market, even if it's on the indie market. So you are now considered a public figure, and people can criticize your work in any shape, fashion, or form that they wish, even if it sounds absolutely stupid and asinine, the things that they say about your work. You need to know that that comes with the territory. So I've actually, it's funny, just a quick note. I write editorials, so I read indie books as well. And I do review indie books and write editorials on them. And I've actually had some authors block me on social media with no interaction, mind you. Like some of these authors, I've had no interaction, personal, like hop in their DMs or anything like that, personal interaction with, and had them just like straight up block me on social media. So, but it's definitely, I would say, like, just be ready to handle criticism. And maybe that's how they handle criticism. Maybe some people is just like, look, if they, as soon as they get a whiff of someone criticizing them, they're just like block, 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 block. And they try to just sweep it all under the rug. They don't want to address it. They don't even want to see it, whatever. And they move on with their life. Hey, more power to you. You'll never ever see me blocking anybody on social media, because it's just really, I don't take it that seriously. Like, I don't think that social media is a real thing in that way. Like, I just don't take it to heart like that. But yeah, it's definitely, you got to have somewhat of a thick skin when you get into the arena, if you will, the commercial arena. Critique can be valuable, entertaining, enlightening, and so on. Creators may be critiqued, and the same freedom of expression that allows an author to write whatever they like gives the critic freedom to say what they like in response. Exactly. So it's up to the audience, it's up to the critics to tear apart the stories for whatever reason. If they think the representation was shit, in their opinion, they can go ahead and say so in a critique or a book review. But that doesn't mean that they get to turn around and start trying to decide policy and push agendas that are going to make it so books are banned from distribution altogether. That's the shit I disagree with. And that's it seems like with the Looney Tunes, that's what's on their agenda sometimes. In short, you can vilify who and what you want, but doing so may make your work poor quality. So another one from the topic here. He went quite extensive. I do appreciate you taking the time, man. This means a lot to me, I have to say. Should men consider it sexist for any female author to be representing male characters with a disparaging narrative? I pretty much know where you're going to stand on this one. As with ableism, RK says, as with ableism, sexism is subjective. Where such concepts seem fairly cut and dried up front, they have been redefined as needed by the various groups who levy them against others, to the point categorizations of hatred no longer matter. And as before, where intent matters in a legal context, it does not matter in public opinion, which is not to say that it should not matter. Oh, a little bit of a stance there. I see you are taking a little bit of a stance. Telling anyone they're sexist for this or that is relatively pointless. Hatred is hatred. Ah, now you're getting into that slippery slope territory. What do you mean hatred is hatred? We're talking about in the context of fiction. Are you one of those people that believes in quote unquote hate speech? That's a nuanced term, a nuanced new age term that had no legal standing whatsoever. But now you see some of our bureaucrats and politicians starting to use this terminology, which is a little bit worrisome, I have to say. Unless an author comes out and declares their motives for writing something a particular way, we are limited to conjecture and interpretation, for that matter, and circumstantial evidence. Those can be used to question an author into an admission or clarification of their motives, which they are absolutely not required to do. An author doesn't have to say shit about their work. Let me just say something on that. An author doesn't have to say shit about their work. And that's why you guys, you may not see me come on here and talk about my own stories very often or ever in great detail, because I really don't think that it's my job to be explaining my stories to you guys, for you guys, or to be explaining why I did this or why I did that in the story, the choices that I made in terms of the narrative, or explaining why I chose to include certain themes in my stories. That's up to you guys. As far as I'm concerned, that's up to the readers to interpret that stuff. Once I hit publish, once I'm done writing the story, once I hit publish, I'm done with it after that. It's for public consumption as far as that goes. And now it's up to the critics. It's up to the readers. It's up to the critics. It's up to you guys to interpret this however you like. And I'll tell you this right now, you will never, ever see me harping on a critic for, if they write a scathing review or anything like that, or choosing to come out of their shell and share their opinions about any piece of work that I have written. It's just not going to happen. And likewise, I hope that everybody knows that you're not going to come at me and start giving me 20 questions or less as far as why I decide to do this, why I decide to do that, or anything like that as far as my own work goes. That's for you guys to figure out. Have the conversations. That's the fun of it. At the end of the day, it's like, that's the whole fun of it. It for me, it's no fun when an author comes on and explains everything about their book to you. You know what I mean? Like that, I want to discover that shit on my own. I want to try and figure it out. And I think from an author standpoint, author perspective, it's fun from a business standpoint. If you talk about everything that happens in your book, well, then why are people going to read your book? At the end of the day, I can only imagine that would hurt sales as far as that goes. Instead of helping sales, it would only hurt sales, because at that point, why read the book if you just went ahead and explained everything that happened in your book and why it happens and all the symbolism and this and that. So let the readers figure that shit out. And then as far as the criticizing goes, I think that it would be fun from the author standpoint, from the author's perspective, to see who's close. You know what I mean? Like when people are talking about your story, like I think it would be fun to just kind of like kick back and just listen, just like check out the conversation, even if people are being critical of it, and just see like just how much, because you know what you were thinking when you were writing the stories, but the readers don't know. And I like to maintain that air of mystery as far as that goes. So I think maintaining that air of mystery is fun for both sides of the coin, because then gives you a chance, like if you tune in on someone's conversation, or if you see what people are saying about your books or your stories, then you can kind of be like, yep, that person gets it, or nope, that person's fucking way off, and just have a good little chuckle to yourself and be like, yeah, that motherfucker, he doesn't know, goddamn it. You know what I mean? Like for me, I think that would be, the fun aspect of it, where let people have their fun, tearing apart your books or talking about your books or trying to figure them out. And then you can have your fun as the author, as far as like seeing who's actually knows what they're talking about and who is full of shit.